Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Gibran Washington, CEO of Ethos Cannabis. Thank you very much for joining me today, Gibran.
Thank you, David. Thanks so much for having me out.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you could reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Gibran, I always like to start with a little bit of background. How was it that you got your start in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two answers to that question, right? You have the formal one, when you formally came into the cannabis industry, and that was about 2 years ago. I've been in part of the formal cannabis industry, but I've been a part of the gray market or black market cannabis world. I started smoking cannabis when I was 10 years old. I've been around cannabis for a long time. I had family members that unfortunately had transitioned now in life who were ahead of their time in cannabis and lost their lives in the war on drugs and things of that nature. So cannabis has always been in the peripheral and a part of my life since I was very young. And my father had cancer, and he not cured himself. He used RSO to help with his cancer and went into relapse and came back again and used RSO as well. So cannabis has been a part of my world from medical and a recreational standpoint since early on in my life. So it's been around for a while, but officially working in cannabis and getting paid for it, that I can tell the IRS, 2 years.
What was it like? When did you decide to make that transition from the legacy market into the regulated market?
Well, I guess, it's as I got older, I felt the legacy calling or maybe some of the legacy connections probably weren't beneficial for what I was trying to do in my career path in corporate America. But I was constantly the guy who left happy hour early because I needed to go get high and come back in. In terms of the legacy market, when did I leave it? As a business person in the legacy market, I left that years ago. As a consumer of the legacy market, never really left.
Okay. Um, what is Ethos Cannabis?
Ethos Cannabis is a multi-state cannabis company who is centered around medical research in the cannabis space. We were the first in the country to have a medical partnership with a accredited medical institution at Thomas Jefferson Hospital. So we were doing a lot of research with them, and that was kind of the foundation at which we were built on. Our vision statement is making cannabis an appropriate place in society, and that really is the underpinning of everything we try to do. We really want to put the medical efficacy aspect of cannabis in the forefront, and obviously understanding that even in recreational markets, a lot of times the reasons why people are using it recreationally do have some medicinal value as well. So we believe in the research of this plant and the wonderful things that it does. That is going to be our differentiator. Instead of putting out a bunch of quantity of cannabis, we want about quality cannabis that's kind of made with the cause in mind.
When you were transitioning from, let's say, traditional corporate America into the cannabis industry, did you have any hiccups along the way?
I mean, I think in every industry they have their nuances. So I think there are some 30 things that were strange to me when I came into cannabis. The overregulation was hard to get adjusted to. The driving factors in the retail spaces is different than in traditional retail, where people are less, what I would say, concerned on the quality of the product and more about the price of the product, which is different than where you see traditional retail spaces where you can clearly delineate between value brands and premium brands, and that value proposition is understood and accepted. But then there were others that are transferable. I came from the food and beverage world, and the similarities are amazing when you think about a bar atmosphere and a bud tender. It's a lot of that same dialogue, a lot of that same interaction that you're looking for experience-wise when you come into a cannabis dispensary. So there were some learnings, but there were a lot of transferable aspects that related very well to the food and beverage industry as I came into this more traditional, quote unquote, retail space, meaning that we're not making things to order, more things off the shelf.
Do you see cannabis eventually becoming more like the food and beverage industry when it comes to
In
a regulatory perspective?
FDA, you're saying in terms of having the FDA or
Yeah,
USDA kind of regulate?
yeah.
Uh, I think that at a certain point they will have some similarities. I think it's going to be difficult because cannabis is not like alcohol. It's not like tobacco. And obviously it's not like food either. So I think the transition, if we go under that umbrella, it needs to have some people who are specifically experts in agriculture, where a lot of traditional restaurants are getting, agricultural audits, and understanding what that transition looks like. It's two separate entities. So, what entity will it all fall under? I'd be interested to see. I think something that oversees alcohol and tobacco is obviously advantageous to a certain degree, but I also don't believe you should blend cannabis in 7-Elevens. I think this needs to stay in, dispensaries where you're getting very detailed information about what products you're actually putting into your body because there's so much still to learn about cannabis.
I read that it was important to you that your work makes a difference. So, is what you're doing making a difference? Making an impact?
I, I think on a lot of different levels. I hope that it does. I think from an internal leadership level, the way that we operate, we run the business is very inclusive, and it gives a lot of people opportunities to speak up and have opportunities to grow outside their comfort zones. And that's kind of the way I built my career, was giving people the reason why they should do something, but also giving them the opportunity to fail if their idea doesn't work. And I think that has been beneficial. I think internally. I think externally, I think people look at us as an organization that is really into patient care, really into the informational aspect of what cannabis can do, and how they can help apply that to their daily lifestyle. So I think making a difference in that aspect and showing people that cannabis can be a positive drug or a positive substance, I think is working on that regard. And then I also think that making an impact, being an African American CEO in an industry that was disproportionately um, harmed by the war on drugs, so that it does show hopefully people that look like me the opportunity that we can grow in this space, and in a space traditionally that we were villainized for, we can now thrive in. So I think hopefully all three of those different aspects, hopefully we're making an impact as an organization and as an individual. Hopefully I can be a light, or a trailblazer in some regards for some people who don't feel like sitting in this chair in this industry or any industry is possible.
On that topic, I understand that DEI initiatives have become highly politicized, but to you, can you speak to the importance of DEI initiatives to yourself and your business?
Yeah, I think I can speak to inclusion initiatives. I think, DEI, with the negative connotation that comes with it, I don't like to use the word too often. I think in its principle, it came out with the right thought process in mind. I don't think there was enough structure around how to execute, how to implement it in today's society. So at Ethos, we believe in inclusion. We believe in equality regardless of where it comes from, man, woman, young or old. We believe they or them. We believe that everyone has an opportunity to be their truest self here at the organization. And if that needs to be labeled as a DEI initiative, then so be it. But we don't believe that DEI defines being a good person. We don't believe DEI defines, loving that neighbor, and treating, everyone with the right just, irregardless of their background. So, get rid of the term. Our philosophical approach is to live life and work in a way that's gracious, humble, and gives everyone a place where they can be their truest self. So if there's a word that you have to attach to it or a phrase, and if it's DEI, then so be it. But I don't traditionally use that, and that sounds strange from African American or minority. But I think we need to approach this differently in terms of how we're delivering this inclusion message, because DEI sometimes alienated, unfortunately, white men in America. So how do we create a different conversation that brings everyone to the table so we can make lasting and impactful change?
It's kind of sometimes it's crazy to me how we need to try to find a way to define just being a good natured person on a day to day basis.
That's it. And I am a nerd at heart, somewhat of a scholar, some would say. But when you look at geopolitics, you look at world politics, and you help me understand why the Ukraine and Russians don't like each other. They look the same. help you understand why the war in Rwanda happened. They all look the same. So I think to your point, if you just become a good person, regardless of the physical makeup externally that you look like, that shouldn't matter much to anyone, anyways. Because even if you are looking like the person across from you, society has shown us, history has shown us, we'll still find a way to not like each other.
True.
So let's not worry about the external. Let's just, like you said, be a good person. How can we do that? Irregardless of race, creed, gender, just be a good person, good human being. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. As trivial as that may sound, or as religious as that may sound, it's simple. That we try to live by over here in Ethos, without the religious aspect, but just the simple aspect of the value set of doing unto others as you wish them to do unto you.
No, I completely agree. Um, so how does ethos create opportunities for former or current black market participants?
That is something that we've been really trying to figure out how we bridge that gap. We've been looking at how to help accessory people, some very prominent people who make a lot of glass blowing and things of that nature for traditional black market, how to bring them into our stores and showcase them in different ways. We have been now looking and searching now for what we call basement cultivators, and buying genetics from them, to be able to bring them into the light of day. I think that, when you look at our portfolio, we don't buy from any large breeders. They're all people who are small. When I say small, we're talking about no more than 30 or 40 plants, most of them. So the genetics that we're now coming out with in the latter part of this year and going into next year are, I think, going to be cutting edge. I think that's one way we help the black market kind of come into the light, is show them a pathway where they can, not all of them want a tax form at the end of the year. A lot of them still like to be paid in cash, but it's giving them the opportunity to be able to come into this space and then allow the flower that they've expressed to its fullest to be in a retail, recreational, or medical market. I think is a great opportunity for them. And then when you look at down the line, how we normalize them in and bring them in as growers and genetics, you'll start seeing that on all of our jars. Is we put our breeder genetics on them, as long as they were okay with letting people know that they're the breeder. We were putting their names on the jars, so people understand that they passed through our hands, but there was someone else locally, usually, or someone else that's a small business owner, that truly put their stamp on this genetic.
Is that stamp a point of pride for the cultivators, or are they still a little leery in terms of putting their name out there?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there are some that is a point of pride, and they could be West Coast oriented, so it's a lot less stress in terms of putting your name out there, because it's fine, it's out in the open. And then others, yeah, to your point, they don't want to necessarily be out there, but we still do pay ode to them by doing business with them, and allowing their businesses to thrive in whatever way that we can help, because the legacy market is what got us to where we are today. We can't ever forget that. And we think we're a craft MSO anyways. So we're always going to do things that are going to be a little bit different than what I saw with the traditional MSOs. We are inequality over quantity, and we'll do things that may sometimes cost a little bit more, because we believe in the culture of cannabis, and what that will mean long term, not necessarily in the short term.
How do you find these basement cultivators?
We've luckily have a lot of legacy employees. Our lead cultivator is a legacy guy, and I think that's someone that you all definitely should have on. As I know that's a lot of you all specialty and in the cultivation space. He's brilliant, genius, and he is a legacy, openly spoken grower. Very successful, let's just say, and has had his fair shares of brush with regulatory authorities over the years, as well as been a consultant all around the world, helping people stand up grows. So, we have someone luckily who has the network, for us to be able to dial into, and through his network, they don't choose like MSOs, so we're able to also go friend to friend, and that's been great for us. Where a lot of these smaller operators or smaller uh, genetic uh, makers are not really MSO friendly. So we've been lucky enough to be able to get some very interesting strains, that I don't think most MSOs will be able to get.
No, we would certainly welcome your lead cultivator on as well. So please extend that offer. But
Oh, he'll nerd out about it. He'll love it.
when you're working, do you have difficulty working with these basement cultivators? Like, is there a learning curve in terms of like, okay, this is how we got to do things in order for us to be able to sell it in the regulated market?
Not necessarily. I mean, you have different windows in each state where you can bring in clones. Where it's open, they let you bring them in. There's not a lot of questions about where they come from. That you just have to claim them as they come into the state. So there's not a lot of what I would call roadblocks there as it pertains to something like that. We send most of any of our genetics we get from basement cultivators or basement growers to our tissue culture lab in Massachusetts to make sure we have clean genetics when they come into the facility. But outside of that, I mean, there really is not a lot of barriers for people not working with some of these smaller uh, cultivators. There's no reason why they shouldn't be.
Is there a switch that happens when, at first some of these cultivators are fearful of working with an MSO, and then, as a result of the friendship, they get a little bit more comfortable, and, do they kind of like how things are on the other side?
Yeah, I think there's a natural hesitation that I think all of these groups are going to have. I mean, they've heard of all the horror stories of what the MSOs have done and not done, or the WalMarts of weed, and I think those who are true enthusiasts of the plant, they are cautious of working with MSOs and having us water down or radiate their product after it comes out just so it can pass testing instead of growing it the right way and taking the time it takes. So once they feel as though we have a good uh, cannabis head on our shoulders, I guess you would say, and we have a good rapport with those individuals. I think cannabis is a substance that brings people together, and I think anyone in this industry is looking for people that are that same elk, the same mindset. So as soon as we can show them that we are one of those organizations who believe in the plant, not necessarily we believe in profit, obviously, but the plant comes first, and we believe the plant can fully express itself in so many ways. So once they understand that we're on that same mission that they are, it traditionally goes very smooth after that.
Do you try to stay away from using the term MSO?
I try to stay away from not including in the fact that we're a craft MSO. I think it has its advantages and disadvantages when you are in different conversations with different people. I think that there is an opportunity for MSOs to change the narrative around partnerships in different markets they're in to help stand the industry up. And I think that will help. And that's the narrative we're trying to help create is what kind of partnerships can we help to not take over someone to help build out the cannabis culture because we do not uh, want the nation to look like Florida, where you don't have small operators who aren't able to really put the chef's kiss, as you may, on the product, the way that some of these smaller cultivators can. I think we all will agree that once you get to 50,000 plus square feet canopies, it's hard to control quality. You can definitely move quantity, but 10 to 15,000 square foot canopy, that's still going to be the best weed in America. There's no way around it. They're hand watering the plants, they're getting to that aspect. So we think that we can help be a bridge or a segue into what MSO can mean, and how we can do that with our privilege of being as large as we are, as we're small MSO or a mid-market MSO, but we're a large player in the cannabis industry. How can we help bridge this gap? Because we don't believe it should be Walmarts of cannabis. We do believe in, similar where the food and beverage industry is going. Local restaurants, local business operators who are from your community, growing your products, and you're giving back to your communities that you actually are living in. We do believe that's going to be the future of cannabis. So we hope is going to be the future of cannabis as we move this ball forward.
So, in your opinion, what is the best weed in America?
I mean, the best weed in America is still going to be found in somebody's basement. I mean, that is what it is, and they're not going to be um, they're not going to have to adhere to the strict testing methodology that we have to adhere to in cannabis. All the other regulatory aspects that come with that. But I mean, West Coast still is the best climate. Northern California is the best climate for it. I mean, you have the elevation, you have the lack of humidity, and you have the wonderful sunshine. There's nothing out there that can beat, God's sunlight. So I mean, those are always going to be the factors that I think that are always going to play against you. They also have different testing methodologies. If you think about the legal market in cannabis from the East Coast to the West Coast, so there's so many factors that play there. So if we had 100,000 CFUs on the Eastern Seaboard like they do on the West Coast, I would say we can give them the run for their money. But they're able to grow for 10, 12, 16 weeks out there because they have 100,000 CFU thresholds. They don't test for some of the same things they test on the Eastern Seaboard for. So apples to apples, we can't really say that. But in terms of climate, um, California, Washington, Oregon, climate is just going to always win out. Massachusetts, Northern Mass, Maine has some great products as well. I mean, that's why traditionally they've always been legacy markets. Northern New York is obviously with the elevation has been good as well. So um, I won't give the West Coast their trophy. And so we're all in the same playing field. But I think that, with the way genetics are coming back and forth, I can't say that any one person or any one region has the best cannabis. I think of this as like a fine dining restaurant. You move the chef out of that restaurant, it's not as good. So if you take some of these breeders and you take them across the country and they're growing it themselves, then yeah, let's do it. But can you scale that up? I mean, cookies have seen how hard that is, right? It's not as easy as just having the genetics. I can give you the recipe, doesn't mean you can recreate.
With a focus on patient care, how does that impact your cultivation methodology?
Well, I think we were making products. We do pain, sleep, anxiety studies. We're doing some opioid studies here coming up next. And where we try to gear our product lines is, we are looking for a different amount of cannabinoids other people may not be looking in on, especially for some of our studies. So we're looking for CBN, high CBN strains if we can possibly find them. We found some great THCV strains that we started to find things of that nature. But then after we cultivate and we bring it down, and a lot of this for the medicinal purposes, a lot of it doesn't. They don't want to smoke it, so we're usually processing it to a different format. So we're always thinking through, what is the end use for this product line that we're coming out with, whether it's ratio vapes, ratio gummies, or whether it's straight CBD gummies. So we constantly think about the end in mind as we're going through the process. But unfortunately, in cannabis, having truly CBD dominant strains isn't advantageous at a current juncture. So we traditionally are doing that more on the processing side, but we do try to lean in onto more of the THCV things. It's a little easier for us to find THCV, a little easier for us to find CBGA and CBN and some of these strains we kind of lean into. And then we take those and we make vapes or processed products with the end understanding what we're trying to accomplish.
Is a lot of this R&D that you're talking about, is this in partnership with the Thomas Jefferson University?
It is. It's in partnership in terms of they give us the idea in terms of what are the studies they want to go down and where do you think there's efficacy for cannabis to be proven. And then on the back end with our team, Steve Garner, the guy you're going to meet, hopefully here sooner than later, our cultivator, and Patrick LaRose, they're popping seeds and going through different iterations of how to do it. If not, trying to find clones we already have that possibly can meet some of the profiles of what they're trying to accomplish in this study. And then after that, once we get the biomass to the way we want it to go, and then obviously through the processing aspect, we're constantly consulting with them about what ratios, what do they think is going to be better, what do they like to see, what form factor they would like to see the product in, what they think will be easily more easily consumable than others. So yeah, there's a definite partnership. Brooke Worcester is technically on our payroll as well, or at the hospital and as well as Ethos. So she constantly is around. She's constantly working with us. She leads her team. So, we're attached to the hip. And it's been a wonderful relationship that we've been able to have for the last several years.
How did that partnership come together?
Wow, I wish I had the exact details, and I don't want to give you the exact details because I'll make someone upset. But we do have a long-standing partnership and connection with Thomas Jefferson University with some of our initial investors. And I'm assuming that is where the initial conversation started. And then our founder and our former CEO is not chair of our board, David Clapper. He was consistently on the mission to really understand the medical efficacy of the plant. As he was getting to learn more about the plant, he was kind of not fully exposed to the plant throughout his life. So as he got into the industry, he really saw the medical efficacy aspect, and he was one of the main reasons that we led the charge towards going towards the medical research aspect in the state of Pennsylvania.
Given your experience, would you encourage other operators to seek out partnerships and opportunities in academia?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all owe it to the consumer to really understand what we're giving them, really understand the efficacy of what it is. I think anyone that tells you that the highest THC is the best cannabis doesn't understand cannabis. So I think if we are doing a disservice to the plant by running high high 30s, low 40 THCs, and we're losing out all the other minor cannabinoids. I think that's a conversation that if you talk to some people in academia, they would tell you that's probably not the best idea, long term or short term for this plant. They'll tell you that in studies they've seen, a 19, 20%er with 3% terps and a bunch of other minor cannabinoids in there will get you just as high as something at 38%. So I think that more MSOs would benefit for taking a more medicinal approach, a more medical approach. And I think it'll be overall good for the industry because it would stop this race to the highest THC and not allow for quality really to come out to the fruition. I think that's what every MSO or every big player probably wants is for that exactly to happen, is quality to play out. But I always think about my drinking days in college, and I never thought that the 110 proof was going to not hurt me the next day. So I mean, I understand why in cannabis we believe that the higher the THC, the better. So we got to re-educate, I think, ourselves in this industry first. That way we can re-educate the consumers, so they can now get products that they really want. I mean, think about if you had anxiety, and you go into a dispensary and they tell you to take a 35% THC, you're going to hate cannabis because it's going to heighten your anxiety through the roof. You need to go somewhere. It's going to tell you like, so how about this CBD strain? That's high in CBD, low in THC, and it's going to sell because we know that's what you actually need. Versus people like us in the industry don't want to grow that plant because it costs just as much as the one with 35%, and no one's going to buy this. So I think there's that opportunity as an industry that we're missing out on. That I think that if we slow down a little bit and talk to some people in academia who are seeing the medical efficacy of this plant, I think we'd be surprised at where this market would actually go if we slowed down and did the research.
So comparing it to other markets, earlier you said that cannabis really doesn't have that like quality versus value, like because people are more into quality in cannabis. Is it more of an issue with quality versus high potency right now?
Yeah, I think that's, and maybe I should change it what I said earlier. That's exactly what I mean. Is I don't think quality and high potency are the same thing. I just don't think that's a factual statement. I think the DEA a couple of weeks ago took a bunch of cannabis off the street, and they were saying in the last 6 months, all the cannabis they tested that's street valued, street product rather, was at 16% THC. And for some reason that was fine for us to buy off the street up until a couple of years ago. And now if it's not 35 or more, oh, I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. It's just like come on, man. This isn't going to replace your opioids, but it does replace a lot of the other uh, big pharma medications you possibly could take, and that I think is where we lean into is how can we get there? Let's not try to get people drunk like alcohol. That's not what cannabis is. It's not a party drug. It's really not much of a social drug. It's usually like a personal thing. There's not a lot of people that get high and go get turned up. They kind of get high and they chill out. So I think that's if that's what we're looking for, then we don't need 38, 39% because you also probably don't want to fall asleep. You kind of want to enjoy it. You want to enjoy the day. You want to enjoy what you're trying to do. You're trying to be functional while taking the edge off.
So saying that it's not as social as, say, alcohol, do you see a future where cannabis lounges and similar establishments are more popular, or do you think that's going to be more of a niche business?
I think it's going to be more of a niche business. I think it's going to grow exponentially over the next several years. I think there's a need for it. I would be one of those people who can consume cannabis in public and not feel paranoid and feel very sociable. But I know a lot of people aren't that way when they consume cannabis. It's usually something else. I hate to say it, but cannabis is kind of a downer. It's not traditionally an upper unless you have a bunch of THCV or something like that in it. So I know sativa is traditionally can give you a little boost of energy, things of that nature, but I don't know if it's traditionally a social drug, the way alcohol gives you energy, kind of gets you going. I think alcohol, you lose your inner inhibitions. Cannabis, it may become more pronounced. You become a little more cautious of how you socialize and maybe what you say. But I think there's a room for it. Do I think it will become as prevalent as bars? I don't know if that will ever happen. In cannabis's current state, if you think about thousands and thousands of years, I mean, it really was never used to kind of get the party going. It was usually the bottle of wine or alcohol or mead or something of that nature to kind of get everybody up and going. Cannabis was there, but it was usually another substance accompanying with it.
Going back to the business side of things, in your opinion, because you've had success, how is it possible for operators in the current state to build a revenue positive cannabis business? And how can they do that, in your opinion, without 280E?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Or is it not
I
possible?
think I know it's very positive because we're cash flow positive after taxes and interest with 280E. I think it's a lot of small decisions that equal big ones that have led us all to be to where we are today. I think you have to be careful about overinvesting. I think that's the biggest thing that we in cannabis have been faulty at is we grew so fast so quickly. All the opportunities aren't great, but we thought that it'd be recreational by now. So I understand why a lot of operators got so big so quickly. I think if you're a smaller operator and you're just retail, I think that's very difficult to try to stay cash flow positive. I think you need to be vertical. And I would start with a smaller canopy and work your way up as you are selling enough product through both your retail and the wholesale channels, depending on what state you're in. But I wouldn't go to a 25, 35,000 square foot canopy at all. And if you can't sell that now, I would look at, shutting down some of those rooms and kind of scaling the operation to what you can do. And then once you establish some good trend lines and in your sales trends, then I would look at expanding. But I think as a retail operator, it's going to be very difficult in the near future with the way prices continue to go down. So if you're not vertical, I think that's going to be a challenge. Conversely, if you're just a grower or cultivator, I think you have your own headwinds as you don't have the reciprocity aspect that a lot of people in the industry are looking for in terms of you buy from me, I buy from you. If you're just selling to people. So I think that the best advice I would give anyone getting in the industry is figure out how you can get vertical. The only problem with that is it's very expensive to be vertical, especially trying to do it at the same time. So if you're going to go retail, I would be super focused on the purchase prices that you're buying on the retail side to try to keep your margins above 40 to 45%, if possible, so you can pay your tax bills. And then try to get that business over, $7, $8 million, because anything less than that is going to be tough.
You said it's a number of small decisions. In your history at the head of this company, can you think of some of those small decisions you made that really made a difference in the company?
Yeah, I think how we scaled up our two operations that we currently have. We're not at full capacity in Massachusetts, which has been a godsend so far. At Ohio, we've we pulled the trigger rather of growing our canopy there with Ohio coming on. So that was a good decision to spend money. The other was a good decision not to spend money.
Mm.
In Pennsylvania, we have made some cutting edge changes, and I'll let Steve kind of get into some of his nerdy stuff and the cultivation and production aspect that have created vast efficiencies for us. So I think there's been some of those things that kind of happened along the way that we didn't realize have a big ripple effect, effect. I'm sorry, on the business, but it ended up having a pretty big one. And then the negative ones that we've had, I won't share them, and we'll just say there's water under the bridge, there are lessons learned, and we'll continue to move forward to try to figure out where our next failure is going to come from. We believe in a lot of failure on this side. Fail quick, fail often.
Well, I like your I like how you talk about embracing organic growth, because I do feel like as part of that, for lack of a better term, green rush, it was kind of this spend money to make money mentality and not natural growth.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think that's we got to understand. I mean, this wasn't traditional financing. We're talking about PEs, private equities, where they're trying to maximize their investment as quickly as possible. They're not using it for long term holds. They're 357s. So when you're thinking about people with that investment mentality, then go big, go fast, go shallow, not deep, and then that makes sense to them because they were trying to flip it as hopefully 280 came down or descheduling happened. They thought it was going to happen a couple of years ago. They were hoping that it was going to happen a couple of years ago. So from an investment standpoint, made a lot of sense,
Mm.
total sense. I think we've all kind of been kicked in the teeth a little bit, and we now understand we may have to hold on to these investments a little longer. They may not be worth as much as you initially thought, especially now the competition is coming to the marketplace. So I think there was learnings there. But I think now we all understand that going big doesn't mean going is better. Canada's shown us that.
We've heard from a lot of operators various types of social equity initiatives. Is there anything in particular that you're doing at Ethos that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff with the communities that we serve. We do believe we are the communities that we serve. We've done a lot of stuff with the Last Prisoners Project and a lot of local organizations, and that's kind of been our forefront. Now, from the social equity standpoint, in terms of social equity applicants, in terms of dispensaries and how we prop them up, we want to do a lot more of that. We have talked to a lot of the legislative people about how we could do more with that because we would love to be able to get a tax credit for it. I think there's a huge opportunity for us larger organizations to help stand up some of these ones that are struggling. But there is no tax benefit for us. And as we're all struggling to stay cash flow positive, and most of us aren't cash flow positive, that becomes a much harder pill to swallow when you're throwing, good money behind good money in this case, but you're not getting any credit for it. So we're really looking for the local at the state level, at least, just give us some reprieve there. Where if we do some help with some of these investments, that will help the smaller social equity aspect. And we're also working with equitable access to cannabis. As we're learning in a lot of the minority communities, there aren't dispensaries. We're really trying to figure out with Thomas Jefferson how we can create delivery services to service some of these communities to also help the consumer aspect of it as well. So I guess it was a three-pronged approach. That's how I would look at it of what we're trying to accomplish.
When it comes to minorities in leadership roles in cannabis, how would you describe the state of the cannabis industry when it comes to minorities leading in both management and C-suite roles?
Not enough, too slow. Um, I think, when we say minorities in cannabis, I think in this specific phrase, when we talk about cannabis, I think we need to be cognizant that um, minority usually means people of color in cannabis. So I don't want to conflate, as much as women have been disenfranchised and they're not given the opportunities. Sometimes, a white woman in cannabis is considered a minority, but that's not what I would call impacted by the war on drugs or the war on cannabis. So I think there needs to be a lot more opportunities in cannabis for people of color to be able to have the opportunity to grow in this industry. We took a street drug or a street industry, brought it into the light of day, didn't change anything. We use all the same terminology, we use all the same strain names and the whole nine. But the people that were on the corners that we threw in prisons and we threw at a four times the one rate in our communities into prison who built this industry. I believe they deserve a fair shot to work in this industry and thrive in this industry because they obviously understand inventory. They obviously understand customer base. They obviously understand the product. And are those transferable skills that they have accumulated going to be beneficial for this industry? Yes, I think they will be beneficial. I think that there needs to be a conversation at the state levels in a lot of these states to allow people with records to be able to even work in cannabis. A lot of people with records aren't allowed to even work in cannabis, even if they got arrested for selling this exact substance. Which is strange in itself. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities for us to look at. I think at the hourly level, there's a huge opportunity for us on the retail side to look at. I think at the executive level, we need to do a better job of shepherding in individuals who understand this industry better. That should maybe traditionally corporate America executives understand this industry, and a lot of times they don't fit in our industry, as I'm sure you know. So allowing some of these organic people to grow in the industry and give them the opportunity, that would be great. I think for us to have. I think the last thing for minorities that really is concerning for me is we're not in the cultivation side at all. I mean, I think in the retail side you'll see more minorities. The C-suite you don't see any at all really, or very few. But on the cultivation side, it's almost none, especially in leadership. And I think that is probably a pathway that I think that we need to reinvest in as an industry because farmers traditionally were minorities. And I'm not saying that Caucasian people didn't have a tremendous impact on the cannabis industry and growing it and making it stay. So, but I'm saying there was a lot of people with hands in the pot, and I would love to see more of them when I walk into some of these other grows that are a little more diverse. And we have a very diverse grows, but I think we can still do better, especially in our leadership roles.
What are some of those pathways? What are some of those ways that we could do better to get more minorities involved in cultivation?
I think we need to really reach into the collegiate landscape, especially a lot of these agricultural schools, and start the recruiting base there. I think showing them there's an opportunity here in cannabis is very lucrative. I think um, is an opportunity for us to get some more minorities into the space. I think unfortunately, when it comes to opportunities, It's similarly to the reason why we celebrate June 15th of 1965, 2 years after Abraham Lincoln is minorities traditionally get the news last. So I think being a little bit forefront in that information flow would definitely help bringing more of these people into the industry. But I also think it's going to take operators, individually operators, to create an environment where they feel welcome and they feel heard in those spaces. And I think Ethos and there's several others that I think are in that same vein and working towards those opportunities and those goals. But I think that's probably the best bet is to go where they are, is at these HBCUs or agricultural schools and start recruiting there and figuring out how we can get the best and brightest talent into this industry right away out of college.
In terms of finding talent right now, do you struggle with the labor shortages, skills gaps, the way that some other operators do, or have you had more success there?
I think on the retail side, we struggle a lot less. I think it's a lot easier to find people to want to work in the retail space. I think that is something that is going to be prevalent. It's always cool, I think, to work in cannabis and in retail. In the cultivation space, it's a challenge. I think we have the same individual or the same mindset that exists in the retail space. It's cool, it's fun, and then all of a sudden you get in there your first day in the grow and you realize it's work. You're a farmer. It's hot. It's humid. I'm going to be sweating every day. Oof, this is real. My hands are a little stiff after cutting and trimming all day. So I think, that element, I think across the board and across the country, I think, it's always hard to find anyone that's really to sweat for 8 hours every day. So, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, but I think that, we have been lucky, a little bit more lucky than others of not being severely understaffed anywhere in any of our facilities and being able to create a good pipeline. I think that has a lot to do with our culture and the way that we treat people. I think the word has gotten out, is getting out, that if you're going to work in cannabis and you're in one of our three states, you probably are going to take a hard look at us before you look at anybody else, just because of the work-life balance and the culture that we bring to this space.
How do you promote a positive work-life balance?
A lot of things I kind of saying before, I am a servant leader in every shape, way, or the form. Do I have an ego? Do I have pride? Of course, I got all that stuff going. But I am not too prideful to be able to listen to other people who work for me. I am always going to ask a lot of questions. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. So what that does is create a culture of inclusion. We believe that help is the most powerful word in any language. And as we ask our teammates for help, we believe that we help each other out, so that no one person feels like they're on an island or the burden is that big. So it's a collective type of approach towards how we lead. Each one of my functional leaders, they also understand that they're responsible for one of their other functional leaders' responsibilities because we are intertwined as an organization. So we believe that works all the way through, all the way down to the hourly level. So what happens in return is you have a very inclusive organization that people have voices, people have opportunities. I think last time I checked this year, we have had 75 individuals be promoted internally since January 1st. So we also practice what we preach about growing people and showing them a pathway to be here. So I think for all those different reasons, again, it's not one thing that we do well. I think it's a bunch of little things that we are trying to intentionally do better, that are hopefully going to create what our ultimate goal is by the end of 2026 is be the workplace of choice in the Northeast, regardless of industry. That is our goal that we're going toward by 2026. So if we can create an environment in cannabis that is the best of any industry, we feel that that would be a good way for us to continue to be a recruiting tool for us moving forward.
You had mentioned struggles with overregulation, particularly when you started in the industry. Do you see rescheduling as a pathway of a better regulatory landscape or a more difficult one?
I think there needs to be some federal consistency when it comes to testing. I think that is something that I would love to see at a federal level where there's a consistent testing method, consistent testing methodology, similar to alcohol. I mean, if I see 35%, 70 proof, I believe it, no matter if I'm in California, if I'm in Florida. I believe it. I think that needs to be consistent. I think that far too often in our industry, test shopping happens. And I don't understand. I didn't understand that. That didn't make any sense to me. How we're getting different numbers, which, again, we go back to the THC and a bunch of BS anyways. But, we get back into that conversation of, well, this doesn't make sense. I think the overregulation and some of the aspects and some of the additional testings and things of that nature, I think if they did more research, they realize they don't need to do some of those things. So I think that would help. And then if you're going to have a regulatory authority or a regulatory body, no matter which state you're in, they need to be able, either personnel wise, to be equal across the board. I think far too often the regulatory authorities in most of the states that we operate in, most of the states in the U.S., they're reactionary. They're not proactive, and they just go after what were being told versus what they're actually seeing going on in the industry. And the industry tends to be several steps ahead of them by the time they catch up. So if we're going to go to a federal regulatory aspect, maybe that will equal the playing field, so everybody's playing by the same rules. But it's I've never seen an industry so regulated and then selectively enforced.
Have you run into any issues with testing?
In terms of
Just in terms of like
that,
issues with labs or inconsistencies, anything like that? Or, how have you made sure that, you're kind of working with the best testing facilities out there that are available to your operations?
yeah, so we try to go with ones with the best reputations. We don't do a bunch of test shopping or anything like that. We don't feel it's necessary. If you can't make it work there, then it probably won't work anywhere else. Um, excuse me. We have seen that there are some that are willing to cut corners more than the others, and that's just not people that we want to really deal with because we want to put out a safe product, and regardless of THC percentage. So we have found there are ups and downs with it, but I think all in all, 95, 98% of all the people who are in testing, they're trying to do the right way. I think there's so many different ways to slice an apple, right? There's so many different ways to get to the end result, that allows for a lot of the fluctuation, of like how you're breaking down that bud, how deep are you going into it, so we need a uniform approach. So I think 98% of them are trying to do the right thing. I think there's probably obviously 2% bad actors who are just, you pay me enough, I'll give you whatever you want. But I think 90% are just trying to do it the right way. It's just that there are variations in how you can test for cannabis across the board. I mean, state to state, but even within the state, there's different ways you can do this thing.
Well, Gibran, I really do appreciate you taking the time and your insight into the industry. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or Ethos Cannabis?
Yeah, I think just from the Ethos Cannabis standpoint, I think just to know that we say internally we got next. We have been the little engine that could, and we've been working quietly behind the scenes to develop a brand and a product line that is going to be somewhat of a disruptor in the cannabis space, but also is going to be something I think the cannabis community, especially in the Northeast, has been wanting for and needing. Is a large player who is believing in the craft aspect of the MSO and is also cultivating products with a purpose. So, just look out for us as we continue to grow our brand and our footprints, whether that's on the medical side or the recreational side. And know that we're going to be a brand that you can trust, you can consistently come back to get quality products, with you in mind, the consumer in mind.
Gibran, you had a background in other industries. One thing I have noticed is that once the cannabis industry kind of gets its professional hooks in, people are there for good. For you professionally, is it cannabis for the foreseeable future?
I'm home. I came home. I feel I'm my truest self. My truest identity is finally allowed to be fulfilled. Being in this industry, I think it was a long time coming. So yeah, I'm home. I think this is where I want to be for the foreseeable future. Obviously, growing Ethos and building us out into a billion-dollar entity is the objective here. But as we look at the cannabis in the next 20, 30 years, I plan to be a player and being a part of it, in some way, shape, or other. I mean, what other industry is better than this one? I'll tell you what.
It's truly inspiring, man. Thank you very much for sharing a bit of your story.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks so much for having me on, man. Look forward to talking to you again sometime.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right. For Gibran Washington, CEO of Ethos Cannabis, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week.